Have you ever thought about booking a trip before? You get on your phone, you get on Airbnb, and you'll see those like really, really cool themed Airbnbs that kind of pop to the top of the search. You'll see that like tree in the mountains, right? Or you'll see a house that has like a Disney theme in every single room for the families and the kids going to Disney. But let's take a step back and think about, what about the owner of that property? What gave that owner the courage to go into a property and put different pictures and themes in each individual room, right? Is it expensive? Is it risky? Is that even a good idea? Well, today we're interviewing Shayne McKinney, and Shayne has gone viral because he's got some really, really unique Airbnbs. He's got a vampire theme. He's got a pirate themed Airbnb, and he's gained hundreds of thousands of followers on TikTok because he literally shows people behind the curtain. He shows all his followers the good, the bad, the ugly. He shows how to make the designs of these properties. How much does it cost? But also too, he shows the downside, which is some of the tenants aren't the best. Maybe they throw a party. So he's shown all that on his social media, and he's gained a tremendous following for that. I thought that this interview was going to be about cool Airbnbs. He's going to share some cool stories, which he does. But I didn't realize that the way that this conversation went was to a bigger purpose, right? This is a rags to riches story from a person that started out as like in marketing, right? He had no real estate experience. And basically what I thought we were going to talk about is not where we ended up. And Shayne has this very unique approach to how he views his tenants and how he views a bigger movement, okay? This is unlike any conversation I've had with any real estate investor in the past. He's got some really, really unique ideas, and I think we could all learn one or two things from Shayne. So thanks for sticking with us, and let's get this thing started. And so we are here with another episode of Burn Your Boat's Wealth. I'm here with my co-host, David Shaw, and we've got a really, really cool guest. His name is Shayne, and you may know Shayne or you may not, but he is huge on social media. He's huge on TikTok, and he does really, really cool stuff. And so we're going to talk about a lot of that today, and you're going to see that Shayne is a little bit different than your average real estate investor that's walking around showing a flip or whatever that looks like. But one of the coolest things is that I get a chance today. I went in. Shayne's got some really cool like themed Airbnbs that he does, like vampires and different themes. So today I get a chance to wear my pirate slash vampire shirt, the closest thing I could find. David's got his flower shirt, and Shayne's got this badass like button down red velvet shirt for all of you guys listening on podcasts where you can't see it on YouTube. So I want to set the scene right now, Shayne, is you've got this like amazing background. It's super cool. You've got the velvet button down shirt. You've got the whole look going, man. So welcome to the show, Shayne.
It's a real honor to be here, and I thank you for inviting me. I didn't know what your podcast was, of course, until I saw the link and kind of looked up, watched your, and the idea of burning your boats and actually moving forward with business is really close to my heart. So I'm happy to be here.
Shayne, our podcast, as you know, as you just mentioned, is called Burn Your Boats Wealth, right? And we believe, Shayne, that wealth is not about money and only about money, because that's a lot of people's understanding about it, right? But it's also about time and freedom and personal expression, right?
Right.
Of who you are and how you want to present yourself to the world and how you go about, living your life every day. But you often have to burn your boats to do that. So, there's a lot of people that are making a lot of money in their W-2 jobs, but they're buttoned into this little thing that they are or they are not. Shayne, I know that you used to work in technology back in the day. And do you mind sharing your personal journey as to how you burned your boats?
Certainly. And I've burned boats a few times in life, probably more than I should sometimes. But for me, I started in technology many, many, many years ago. I developed a website that was akin to Grubhub. We would do orders for food online and allow people to order from their computers, pay with a credit card. I put a lot of my money at the time. It was maybe $10,000, $15,000, but I was from a very poor background in Arkansas. That was a lot of money for me and my friends to put into this. And we ran into a problem with the credit card snafu. I was in my early 20s. The credit card companies didn't want to approve the processing, and it ended up shutting us down just because we couldn't get credit card processing. But that would have been years. before Grubhub, but from learning the programming, learning the aspects of launching a web business, learning the internet marketing aspects of that, I started going into business consulting and helping other companies to go to market with their websites and what technologies to use. And it was a somewhat, for my area, it was a lucrative career, and it was good. I got to meet lots of people and experience lots of business. I got to see, because it's a strange thing in business. I'll tell you this. When you go in as a person that can work on computers, at least for me, my experience always was people will be shy about their business. Like, I'm not going to talk to you about really how this works. They're just going to have the persona they show. This is my accounting business. I'm the accountant, whatever.
Right.
When you go in and you're the guy working on their computers or helping them with technology, we're just going to show you everything.
Right.
What do you want to see? Here's my browser history. Just take a look at that. You want my
Yeah.
the password? They just open everything to you immediately. It's the weirdest thing, which is part of why people get taken advantage of sometimes by
Right.
technology scams. But as a result of that, I got to see beyond just the veil that most businesses have. And I saw the struggles in different industries and how different people overcame that for many, many, many years. But in trying to grow that consulting business, I always ran into a brick wall where I just couldn't get more. I just couldn't get enough. I felt like I was just beating my head against this wall and I hired people. We started the office. We did everything to grow the business the right way. And all that money was more or less invested in and then coming back out, and it would work out to where I would make the same year after year. And that kind of starts to bring you down after a while. I would say it's probably similar to working the same factory job year after year after year, making roughly the same money, maybe 5% more this year, but not enough to
Right.
really matter, not enough to really change my life. And one day I came home from work and my wife had a board game called Cash Flow. It's the Robert Kiyosaki game.
Yep.
We all
And
know
she's
it
like,
well.
she said, I saw this on a podcast. We're going to play this game tonight. And I'm like, okay, sure. And I asked her how much this game cost as she set it up. And she's like, $100. And I was like, you paid $100 on a board game? Really? I'm questioning the whole thing. I was literally 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes into this game when my brain went, and I decided I need to be a real estate investor. Like, I need to be a real estate investor right now. I literally called my bank the next morning, and 6 weeks later, I'd bought my first property. And then a few months later, I burned my boats. I told all my clients I was going to no longer do technology consulting. I found other people to pick them up as clients, and I knew there would be no going back. And it was scary. I made less money that year by far than I had made the years before, but I made a lot more wealth that year.
That's a big fear, right? Is that you burn your boats, right? You're excited and people expect, I think so many people expect they're making X in their job or their company that they're kind of running like you were. And then they're like, all right, I'm going to burn my boats. I'm going to go all in on real estate. I'm going to go in on self-storage or multifamily or whatever the widget is that they go into. And they're kind of expecting that they need to have the same amount of income. And if they can't, then they shouldn't make the jump. When you were going through that process of not making as much, did you get discouraged? Did you feel like, man, what the heck did I do? I wish my wife would have never bought that damn board game. What was going through your head?
There were a couple moments underneath the house when I was jacking up a house in the
Yep.
mud in the cold November days, trying to get the floor level on this fixer-upper I'm working on, where I probably had some regrets. They were short-lived and very small. When I commit to something, I don't know, I'm just an all-in guy, whether it be my weird diet or whatever it may be. When I decide I'm going to do this, I just go all in. That's just my nature. And so I think that offered some help in that. I do think that helped me to overcome it. I don't know, it's a natural thing. It's not something that I think I learned, but I think some people do lack it. And I think it's important that you learn. There is a point where continuing to hang on to something with one hand means you can't reach the thing that you need to get with your other
Yeah.
hand. Sometimes you have to let go, and then you can get much, much further. And yeah, I knew I wasn't going to get to go to Hawaii that year. I knew I wasn't going to get to take the vacations those first couple of years that we had taken the years before in business. I knew that wasn't going to be the case, but I also knew that my net worth when I started this was about $120,000. So being 37 years old, if I sold everything I had, For my entire working career of 20 years, I would have about $120,000 to show for it. And I made that on my first investment deal
That's
after 8
powerful.
weeks. So my net worth more than doubled in 8 weeks of doing this. So, my money was way less, but my wealth growth became rapid.
Yeah, that's it. So much to unpack right there. For me, Shayne, I've done the same thing where I've just said I'm not doing this anymore. That's it. And it's effective immediately, right? And I really I thank my own personality type, yours too, for making that decision and just say okay, because there's millions and millions of people who are just like, no, I'm going to try and do that first flip whilst keeping my job, whilst doing this, whilst not going all in, to your point, right? And they kind of just never get there because they're too busy, it's too hard, da 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 da. Shayne, I want to thank Robert Kiyosaki for making that game in your case, because there's so many people who attribute their real estate transition from W2 or whatever it is to real estate because they've read either Rich Dad Poor Dad or play the cash flow game. So when you did the next morning, I'm going to get into your brain, the day after you play the cash flow game, what is your first decision about real estate? Are you decide I'm going to flip something, I'm going to buy something, I'm going to rent something? What's your first approach?
So my wife and I, we homeschooled our children. I was the only income for us in our early years. We bought a house pretty early in life, about 23, 24. Um, and my nature is I want to be improving at whatever I do. So whether it be my health and exercise, whether it be my business and my job, whether it be my real estate or the house I live in, I want to improve it. So I kept working on trying to improve my house, but I was poor and had no money. So I had to come up with some very cost-effective ways to improve my house, how to make repairs or how to make my house really special. As you can tell, I have an unusual personality, so I want my house to have an unusual personality.
Right.
Got it. Yep.
So part of doing that meant that I adapted and innovated a lot of new ways to do home renovations that were less costly than a lot of other folks would use. So naturally for me, a flip seemed like the perfect thing to do because I'd had at that point, 13, 14 years of experience doing this. So I found a property that, what I say is I looked for a property that was scary to everybody else.
Yeah.
I wanted a property that everybody would be afraid of, but would be really inexpensive to fix. And I found a great one for my first house. It was $27,000 here in
Wow.
Fort Smith, Arkansas. I'm buying one right now for 18,500. You can still find these deals around here in
Yeah.
this market. Renovated, it was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, and it was worth about $180,000. But the major problems in it were extremely minor, and they were scary looking. The ceiling had caved in on the downstairs bathroom, and you could see all the insulation. You couldn't see the tile. So what caused that was somebody used spray foam to install the toilet upstairs above it. So we cut the spray foam away. We put in an actual wax ring on the toilet. Now it can't leak. Then we put up 3 pieces of sheetrock. It probably cost us $40 to fix that. And when we picked up all that stuff off the floor, it was flagstone tile floor on the downstairs bathroom. It was absolutely beautiful. And $50, $60 maybe total in paint and everything else to fix that space and make it amazing. That's the kind of stuff that I look for. I always look for something that is going to scare the normal person, smells bad, had way too many dogs, that kind of thing. And that has the most, I feel like, room for equity growth.
Yeah, we can smell that house. We call the smell of those houses the eau de flipper. The smell of the flipper. You and I both know it. I've been in.
And I bet some of them it takes 6 to 8 months to get that smell out.
That's right.
I appreciate Shayne. As we dug into your TikTok, and you've got a lot of the walkthroughs after the tenants, whether they're Airbnb or normal. And one of the first things that you always do, because you can't smell, I can't watch a video of you and smell what you're smelling, but you're like, oh, it smells not horrible, like it's one of the first things, and we all can relate to it, right? Because I think a lot of people, even if you're not in real estate, you've probably walked through a house and it smells like dog or it smells like cat piss or something. And so it's funny. I remember one of the first flips I ever did. I remember I walked in and the bathroom was filled with mold, and I remember seeing it. And it was lit. You could see the mold. Like it wasn't just little places. It was like the entire bathroom. And I remember walking in, and we were with a few other realtors or investors, and they were like, "Oh God," they just like immediately walked out. And I remember I'm like, mold's not really that big of a deal to get rid of. Like there's ways to remediate mold on your
That's
own
right.
with bleach and water goes a long ways with mold to be able to do that. In worst case scenario, you have to yank out the drywall on a 4 foot by 6 foot bathroom, not the end of the world. And so it's funny how little things like that just push away most people. And that's where you can, with the experience that you get the edge to be able to say, oh man, that mold's horrible. There's no way I'm walking out, I'm not buying this as you're writing an offer in the car. Talk to us a little bit, about you're authentic, right? You're out there, you're showing people what you do. I think that it's great to see that and feel that. And David and I try and we want to do the same thing where we're showing the real world, the good, the bad, the ugly. We're not driving around in Lamborghinis and telling everyone how great we are and the last deal we did. How did that come about in terms of you being able to show that authenticity when you're portraying that out in your day-to-day job now?
So, going back to the weird technology times, everything about my life is a little bit abnormal, and I understand that. I'm weird. I know I don't fit into the normal.
Shayne,
But
Shayne, there is no normal. There is no
I
normal.
agree completely. Normal is boring. Normal is another
Yeah, yeah.
word for
There is
boring.
no norm. Not in our world.
Yep. So, uh, I'm just going to go out and spread this exactly because if you go to my oldest TikTok videos, you would see this anyway. One of When I was in business in Bible Belt, Arkansas, my wife and I had a dungeon that I built underneath my master bedroom that you access through a secret door that opened into a spiral
Yes.
staircase that I built. So I'm in a town, you literally can't buy alcohol in my city. It's against the law because it's sinful.
Oh my gosh.
So literally, I'm growing up and it's a town of 30,000 people. It's not a nowhere place, and it's right next to a city of about 100,000, but these people, I don't know how they're going to accept that aspect of my life. So we keep it a secret for the most part. But at some point, I know I'm going to sell this house, and it's going to be very obvious what happens. And when we do sell this house, it goes viral across the internet. And I do that on purpose. I'm an internet marketing background. So I
Yeah.
contact newspapers, and the Miami Herald did a story about my house. The Wall Street Journal did a story about my house. It
Wow.
became like millions and millions of people saw my house for sale in Arkansas with the dungeon. So that became a thing that I could no longer hide. And I knew when I sold that, no, like I wouldn't be able to hide that. But I was in business. I was in business consulting in this town. So I had a close relationship with people all over my area because I just decided I was going to start doing that. When I went into real estate investing, it became natural for me to want to maintain entire transparency with everybody about what I was doing and talk about the struggles, talk about the success, talk about why I do it this way, how somebody else could do it. It's always been very natural for me to talk about the things that most people don't want to talk about. I'm not here to portray a never failing or never sucking life, because I can tell you the last two Christmases, I've been crawling under houses on Christmas Day to deal with frozen pipes or problems that homes have had instead of spending time with my family. That's not the glamorous part of real estate investing. And could I hire a plumber or something at that point? Yes, I could, but my kids are already out of the house, and perhaps this plumber has a family that he wants to spend time with. To me, having the respect that I can go do this is my burden, this is my problem. And then when I do ask for somebody to do something for me, I feel like I get a much better result from asking for those people because they know I respect their time, and they know I wouldn't ask if I didn't need it.
Yeah, I think that's why you garner so much empathy. And to be clear, everybody, like Shayne has millions and certainly hundreds of thousands of daily followers and millions of views because of that authenticity that you display. And when we're discussing real estate, there's so many people, Shayne, and we're not going to beat on this drum too long, but there are so many people beating their chest and talking about, hundreds of dollars and millions of dollars, thousands of dollars, and blah, 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 blah. And he might be just simply an LP investor in some fund. So, yeah, I've got, $1,200. Like,
Yeah,
no, you
yeah,
don't. No, what I really, really like about you, what is actually quite unique about you is really two things, is that you're fully authentic in what you're doing. right? And you don't sugarcoat it. And neither do we. In our conversations, you know, we dig deeply into the psychological, what we call the psychological bullets of actually owning real estate. And so, you know, in reviewing all of your publications so far, if you will, your videos, you're out there, a car is driven into your house. You've
That
got
happened recently.
It happened recently. It happened very recently, right? And then you've got insurance issues. You've got, you know, fleas in houses. You've got tenants beating on your house. You've got Airbnbs where you got shitty Airbnb tenants that like mess up your house. But what I want to say to you is two things. Number one, it's so important that you show that because that's the real world of this. It's not anything to do with your circumstances or Fort Smith where you are. That's just owning real estate. And I don't care if that's in LA, New York, New Jersey, or Florida. That's what it's like to own real estate. So really compliment you on that. And I want to know a little bit about, you know, how you and why you should go about it that way. And what I want to know also is that you do this work yourself. You say you could hire the plumber, and that comes across as well. So I really want to know about this idea, you know, emotionally, how you deal with all of these big psychological bullets. Clark's had a bunch of stuff recently go down in his world, but you handle it in a very particular way, and it's quite unique. I do too, but you'd be amazed how many people get emotional when these things happen. Talk to me about that emotional maturity you have to being a real estate investor, Shayne.
So I think it comes through a series of things through my life. But basically, I want to separate myself from the situation. The car drove through my house. My wife called me, said a car hit my house. And I get there, there's a fire truck, and it hit my house at 45 miles an hour. This wasn't like a
Oh,
bump. This was through a fence. It went across a football field. The person
Yeah.
passed out the main road through two chain link fences, through an 8-foot privacy fence, up an embankment, and into the front porch on my house, and took out an entire 4-foot by 4-foot square pillar that was holding up a corner of a like
Yeah.
16-foot wide roof.
huge.
So it's a pretty big impact. I get there. I can't change that circumstance right then. Like, so first off, become aware of the fact you can't change the fact that circumstances are going to happen. Bad stuff is going to happen all the time. Problems are going to happen all the time, no matter what you're doing. If you're in business, if you're an employee, if you're just driving down the road, you can't control the environment around you to the point. I have a friend whose car wrecked 2 days ago. He was in self-driving mode on his Tesla and it hydroplaned. And I
Oh
was talking
no.
to him about it. Like, he's not even driving his own car and bad things are happening. You know, like
Yeah. Yeah.
it can happen at any point, at any moment. So my objective is not to avoid these problems. And my objective is not to freak out when a problem happens, but say, okay, this is the reality of the situation. And I try to show that. And you see that video, I go out, I see the scenario. Okay, first assess, is the person okay? And I go check and make sure they're okay. Is my wife okay? Is everything, is the structure all right? And I can tell that there's some structural problems that I need to reinforce. Those are the things I can immediately change. So what can I immediately impact? What are the things that are then going to be long-term? But throughout that whole thing, I try to keep asking myself, what is this going to look like in a year? What is this going to look like in 5 years when I look back at this? It's not going to be that big of a thing. It'll be a story I tell when I'm hanging out with a guy sipping a whiskey
Right.
or something.
Yeah.
It's going to be, you won't believe this thing that happened. It'll be a TikTok video I talked on podcasts about. I mean, it'll be
Yeah.
whatever it's going to be, but it's not going to be, this isn't destroying who I am. This isn't going to stop me from doing the thing that I was planning to do. It may delay things. It may be a bump on the road, but taking that extra perspective, pulling myself out of it and say, what will this look like in a year? What will this look like in 5 years to me? How does this change anything? And generally, a lot of those things that seem like really big deals are probably not that significant to you in the future.
I think to summarize, it's just having high emotional intelligence, you know, like it's
Maybe.
being able to count to 10, right? It's being able to step back and look at it from a 10,000 foot view and say, is this really that big of a deal? If I get all pissy and moany and start throwing things, is that going to fix the pillar that just fell from your, you know, from your porch? And I love that, you know, and I think that emotional intelligence, you know, we've done a lot of interviews, Shayne, with a lot of really, really successful guys and girls, and we're always looking for, you know, the unique things that you present that you do, that why people are drawn to you, right? And, I think that's something that's very interesting. You mentioned earlier about the plumber. We're 50 plus episodes in, and we have not yet talked about the plight of the plumber, right? Like, is the plumber going to have to go out on Christmas? He has a family as well, too. And I noticed something that just kind of looking into your background that I never hear about, right? A lot of people talk about, rentals and cash flow and, cap rates and IRR and all the different terms for real estate when you buy and cash flow and how do we get rents up on the renters. And I've heard you talk multiple times about the tenant, the actual tenant. You put a face on the tenant, right? We're taking I don't hear you talking about the cap rate on the rental property that you've renovated and you rented out, and you talk about, well, I want to help tenants, put them in a better position, right? I want them to be homeowners, right? If you ask the typical real estate investor if they were going to rent out to a tenant so they would become a homeowner, a lot of them would say, I don't want that person because I want my tenant to stay there for forever, right? And you have a much different approach and you empathize. It's like, we don't want to be a renter nation, right? We don't want to just have a bunch of renters because you're not creating wealth through home ownership. But on the other side of the coin, right? I know you did a video the other day about should I let a homeless person into your unit, right? Like they rented from you before, but they're on shaky ground. Should I help them out, right? And it sounds good in nature to say, let me bring that homeless couple in because they just got a job and they're getting back on their feet, right? Sometimes it's the Hallmark story, and sometimes it's you're not getting rent after the first payment and you're evicting 2 months later, right? Talk to us a little bit about your empathy for the tenant that nobody talks about. No one puts a face on the tenant versus the risk of not choosing the nice family that looks good on an application and maybe helping someone that needs that extra push in the right direction, but there's more risk in it.
So I'm going to start this from a weird angle. So in Arkansas, it's extremely fast and easy to evict someone. Before COVID, it was 24 hours and I didn't even have to go to court. I just went to the sheriff's office and paid them $60 and they would be out the next day.
Wow.
That was how fast it was. Now we do have a court thing that changed during COVID. So it takes about a week to do an eviction on basically any grounds. And so my state is probably the easiest state to do evictions. So I bring this up because my ability to be kind and give people a chance is partly because I'm not going to be stuck with them for 2 months if something goes wrong.
Got it.
The very thing that everybody thinks about, let's protect tenants' rights. Let's make it to where we want to, that's what makes your rent prices expensive. That's what makes a landlord do credit checks. I don't do credit checks with my tenants. I expect them to have bad credit because if they don't pay me, I can make them leave very rapidly. And I've only had to do one eviction ever, to be clear. It's not like I just evict people all day and I'm pretending about that. I've only had to do one eviction because when somebody gets behind, I can go have a conversation and say, look, I can evict you. This will be on your record. How can I help you to move on to something different? And a lot of times I'll pay for a U-Haul or something and they'll give me the keys and we can make something that's not as bad of an agreement. If I were in California, if I were in New York, I would not be able to be this empathetic with my tenants. And it would be because of those state laws that protect the tenants that would force me to be more cruel about it. The irony is a lot of times the things we try to put in place to protect people actually end up hurting them the most.
The laws of unintended consequences are deep and strong. Shayne, I'm Irish, right? I'm from Ireland, right? And if I make a loan, let's say, if I make a loan and it's collateralized against a piece of real estate in Ireland. So let's say somebody wants to do a startup, they want to do a startup technology company, or they want to, do a rehab or a flip or whatever. I can never execute on that foreclosure. Never, because it's just not in the culture to foreclose on a property and get a judgment and then force that judgment through to actually selling the house and me regaining, my collateral, right? And because of that, economically, everything just slows down. The whole economic environment slows down because there's not a quick and easy remedy for either foreclosing or for taking that collateral, and therefore nothing gets done. It's why I live here. It's literally one of the reasons why I think this country in general is so unique, you know, that you could actually execute on that. So that's amazing. That's fascinating. Now you're in one also, a lot of people don't really quite understand, you know, how fast growing your world is over there in Bentonville and Fayetteville and, you know, Northwest Arkansas, and that whole Arkansas kind of triangle up there at the moment is it's in the news. You know, Henry Washington is banging on about it all day, every day, right? What's going in your market? You know, just that's fascinating that you can do that. But
Yeah.
in terms of, do you flip? Do you always hold? Do you what's going on in your market, and what's your personal strategy?
So yes, we're importing people from all over the country here constantly because of the low cost of living
Yep.
and because of the job opportunities. Despite thousands of people moving here yearly, our unemployment rate's at 3.7%. In Northwest Arkansas, it's even lower, which we can call it. We're in Northwest Arkansas, but if you're from here, we're not in Northwest Arkansas. That's about an hour north. But if you look on the map, Fort Smith is there. And
Yeah.
so our area is growing very rapidly. I flipped and I've sold a couple of flips. I don't really like the flip to sell market. It just doesn't feel good to me. I like to hang on to things that I work on. I probably get too much of a personal attachment on the things I work on. So I primarily do buy and hold, BRRRRR, how many R's are involved in that.
Yeah.
Like to talk about.
But you know what, Shayne, if I go back and you know, interviewer ask a lot of my very, very high volume flip, you know, friends or whatever in the marketplace, I asked them, do they have any regrets about, you know, about their career? And they all have one regret. Do you want to know what it is?
They didn't hold enough profits.
They didn't hold enough
Ding,
profits.
ding, ding.
Yeah. Yeah. They wish they wish they'd kept more. So, you know, while that might not be a great thing for you right now, you're going to be very, very glad that you took that approach very shortly, if not already.
Right. I'm pretty glad that I have. The one year I decided to do it was a home that I was emotionally attached to. It just did not make sense to rent it. I wasn't doing Airbnbs at the time. It was just too nice of a house to rent. It needed to be flipped. So I got a lot of emotional attachment to it. I spent probably 8 months working on it, and I made over $100,000 on it. You know, it wasn't bad on the flip, but I could have probably flipped 2 to 3 rentals during that time, and my cash flow now would be probably $1,500 to $2,000 more a month. So after 3 or 4 years, you're looking at I would have made more money. It doesn't take very long for me to recognize that I would have made more doing more simple rentals that are easier flips, easier renovations.
I almost want to scream that from the mountaintop. I almost want to like stop that soundbite right there, and we need to play that because so many people can't see the bigger picture, right, of what you just said, right? You flipped it, you made great money, and yet if you would have kept it, you would have made so much more money, so many more tax benefits, all the different things that come from it. What's interesting again about your story, Shayne, is like you have like everyone watching, you need to go on Shayne's TikTok and look at some of the really cool like projects he has with the rentals. You have like very themed. You have like a vampire theme. You have the chop shop Airbnb. But a lot of people listening are
I like the pirate one.
the pirate one is I
That's
can't
my
I don't
baby.
I think I don't know which one I like the best. It's hard to say. We should do like a poll as like what's the coolest. Have you done a poll as to which the coolest one?
I haven't done a poll. I'm waiting. I've got 2 more in the works that are about to come out, and I want to wait till all 5 of those are done because I think it'll be a little bit more difficult to decide then. It'll be more interesting content. But I'm working on a science fiction, like an 80s sci-fi, cheesy sci-fi house.
Yes.
And then I'm
So
working on one that'll be Dungeons and Dragons themed. That's actually what I'm in right now is that one.
that's so cool. So but a lot of people, I know a lot of people, like we live in Tampa, right? And like if you go over to Orlando, there's a ton of like Disney themed, Airbnbs where they just deck it out for the kids and all that kind of stuff. Do you ever get to a point where you're like, this is too customized and I'm fearful that like maybe it won't rent out enough? Because I know that's a lot of people's fears is like, I don't want to put Mickey Mouse all over the walls because what if the guests don't have kids and they don't want to stay at the Disney? What kind of feedback do you get? You have a very unique product that most people, to be honest, don't have the balls to do what you do, right? Do you reap the benefits? Do you get long times where you don't have people booking? What do you see behind the scenes? Let us behind the curtain a little bit.
Right. So we book at a higher rate than the other B&Bs in our area.
Well,
Ultimately, most B&Bs, I'll talk about, you know, the book, The Experience Economy. It was popular maybe 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
A lot of people started focusing on that. But the idea is this, basically, as humans become more free time oriented, we work less, we have AI doing more work for us, we have more automation, people have more time available to do things. And the thing that becomes more valuable to a person is memories and experiences. Most of us, when we talk to someone, the things they regret are not having experiences or not being able to have those memories. That is an extremely valuable commodity to a person. Once you become financially stable, once you become, or even when you're not, just an average factory worker in the United States has a lot of free time and has a lot of expendable income in many places. So what do they do with their time? They can sit in the same place, watch the same show on TV, or they can go stay in a hotel room or go stay in a B&B that looks exactly like the last hotel room they
yeah.
stayed. And your brain will literally take all of those hotel rooms and it will just zip them all together and compress them until you can't
Yep.
remember one hotel room from another.
Yep.
So providing an experience that becomes a memory, even if it's a little cheesy or a little hokey or whatever,
Right.
gives an opportunity for somebody to remember that time they stayed in Fort Smith, Arkansas, and the countertops looked like a whirlpool, and they talked like a pirate with the host. Even our interactions are on theme. So my messages that go out will be recruiting a person to serve on
That's
my pirate
awesome.
ship, and the vampire's den is going to welcome them for coming to the meal and appreciate their donation and talk about how it's important to take it easy for 24 hours after their stay. You know, we put everything into the theme, and that makes it a memorable experience, and it makes it a good experience. And it's a place, you know, your average B&B, you don't go there and do a wedding, you don't go there and do a kid's birthday party necessarily, but for us, we get those kinds of bookings all the time.
That's fascinating, Shayne. The amount of people thinking like you, and that goes for your obviously it goes for your social media posts now as well. There's so few people actually laying that out, and I know exactly what you're talking about. When I go away now, I'm just, and it could be anywhere in the world. It's like if I see bland, blancmange, vanilla walls, like I just don't want to be in there. I don't want to be in that room. I don't want to be in that space. You're really thinking this out.
Well, I come from a poor background again, and one of the things that we used to call the color of walls, and if I say the name of this color, and it was actually a friend of mine that said it once, and now I can't get this out of my head. When I see it, I think of it, and we call it poverty beige. When I see the walls, you know exactly the color I'm talking about,
I
Yep.
do.
and
Poverty based.
it's in hotel rooms, it's in so many places, and it just becomes off-putting to people once you've been in those environments for a long time. And I want things to have a little bit more depth of color. I want things to have a little bit more. And then we have like millennial gray now has kind of become a taboo color. So a lot of people are trying to move away from that. I never adopted that. I never went with that color.
Yeah.
To me, if everybody's doing it, this includes stock investing or any type of investment I'm doing. If everybody does it, kind of like the houses, if everybody's like, oh, that's a great deal, I know I'm not going to get a good deal on that house. If everybody sees it and thinks that,
Yeah.
it needs to be the house that smells bad. It needs to be the house with the collapsed in, something like that. I know I'm going to get a good deal when people are like, "Are you sure?"
Yeah.
Uh, so same thing with my decor style and things like that. I'm going to be a little bit different, and people will be like, "I don't know about that," and that means that they're having a reaction to it. That means they have an emotion involved, and it makes them uncomfortable. And you guys should be intimately aware with this. All of us need to be uncomfortable more in life. We need to challenge ourselves to not be comfortable. If you spend a day or two in comfort and you're like, wow, everything's just smooth and easy, that makes me uneasy. Like I start to think,
Me
oh
too.
no, I'm not, I need to be doing something. Like we got to come
Yeah.
up with something. Otherwise, I'm not growing. Otherwise, I start to change. And so
Bravo.
I want my places to make people a little bit uncomfortable. I want it to inspire people. I want it to change people. Um, I want I want people to thrive and to be the best versions of themselves that they can be.
I think that's brilliant, Shayne. That's we talk a lot about the dangers of comfort. And I'll hit you up with a quote that we've quoted twice in a podcast recently, but I just think it's so powerful that, you know, it's life is not the destination and it's not even the journey. It's who you become on that journey. And I see
Right.
that you're always, you mentioned earlier on, you know, that you're building 5 of these things, and I wonder if I come back and check in with Shayne in 5 more years, what this will look like. You know, what your future plans will be. And I'm going to ask you that question, Shayne. But I want to ask you a question first. It's one of the things when I was getting started, and I think you're a really, really important person out there for people trying to learn about real estate, trying to understand the real hurdles and the message that you're putting out there. You're inspiring tens of thousands of people to get their first deal and to do their first deal. But I want to ask you this question. When I was getting started, Shayne, I don't come from money either, right? And you know, almost everyone I know who's in real estate meaningfully also started with nothing. And so a lot of people, they would like to get into real estate. They would like to burn their boats. They would like to leave that W-2, you know, that's killing their soul every day. But they'll come up with the excuse or their reality, which is, I don't have the money. Can I ask you how you managed to get over that poverty financial hurdle? How you got your first deal, second deal, third deal, and how you continue to fund your deals. In the zeitgeist out there, nobody talks about how to fund your deals. How do you fund your deals, Shayne?
So right now I'm actually struggling with funding. That is the current hurdle that I've had this past year and a half or so. And I've got a couple funding options, and then I've had, like right now, I've got a couple deals I'm trying to buy. Literally one was going to close Monday, and I've had to delay closing because the person came to me with different terms than what we discussed on the phone when it came time to close the deal. So funding is a problem, absolutely. My area has a unique funding problem that most of you don't have. And this is going to sound, if you're not in real estate world or lending world, this is going to sound asinine to most of you when I say this. My homes are too cheap.
They're too cheap. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm in an area where, you know, I could spend $100,000 on a house, and those houses exist, but those aren't the ones I'm going to make $150,000 in equity when I buy.
Yeah.
Wow.
And lenders don't want to lend on homes that are less than $100,000. I've got a contract right now on a home for $18,500. Like, I can't get lending on that. I have to do lines of credit, or I have to do other methods in order to make that money available. And, you know, my cash flow is such, I'm still only a few years into this, where I make a few $1,000s a month. You know, I make a decent living, but I can't just take 100% of that money and put it into a house, because then it's tied up in that house for a few months and I can't buy any more deals. And that becomes problematic as well. So I need to have lending, but lending is hard to, so I'm trying to navigate those things, and it's challenging. Plus, whenever I talk to a lender from Florida or from New York or something about lending in Arkansas, there's a stigma about my area. And there's this, if you don't know, and if you've been to Northwest Arkansas, you know, this place is incredible. Like, it is not what you picture when you think of Arkansas in your mind.
Right.
It is mountains, it is cities, it is beautiful, it is amazing. But the perception of it still comes back to some of the early entertainers in Hollywood created a stigma of hillbillies that are barefoot and the gut hanging out. And that became a comedy routine that they were able to make a career out of. And one of them was from, I lived in his house for a while, Bob Burns. Was from Van Buren, and he was well educated, learned music and everything from the time he was like 12 or 13. Super well educated person from a little city who went on to become famous in Hollywood and on the radio. Very educated person, but his whole persona was, he's from this backwoods hick family that, you know, has chickens running through the kitchen and everything else that you would have as a stereotype. That was his personality he portrayed, which he knew to be false. And all the people that watched him knew it to be false to some degree, but later generations would look back on that and that would skew that. And so I actually have to overcome a stigma about us all just being a bunch of hillbillies here in Arkansas too, which is a unusual thing. So financing is definitely a struggle for me. And I've come up with some creative ways to fund some things here and there, but that's, you just have to keep working it.
Can we walk through the numbers then of one of your deals? Like, let's just have that conversation. I wasn't even thinking about that. So let's say we buy, you buy a house and you theme it, right? So you buy a house for whatever, you're gonna choose a number, and you're gonna choose the renovation budget to theme it. And then you're going to rent it out in Airbnb. And you get, I don't know if you have seasonality or whatever, but let's just walk through what's your ROI? What's your return on investment? And how much does it cost to put that into operation? How much does it make? Walk me through one of your deals on an annual basis.
I've got 2 deals that are in the works right now that I'm trying to get all financed and everything. So I'll do one, 18,500. It's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, maybe 4-bedroom, 2-story. This home is Victorian, 1880s. It's got a really cool front feature on it. And a slumlord owned this house for years, one of the most notorious slumlords in our area. Actually showing this auction, I did this auction live on TikTok
I
when I
saw
bought
it.
the house.
Yeah, we
So I
saw
bought
it.
this
Yeah.
house live.
I saw it.
The the guy literally put floor epoxy for like a garage floor over the hardwoods on the inside, and just
Oh,
he does this in all of his properties. People that saw that video were like, "Oh, that's this guy's house." I'm not even going to say his
yeah.
name here because I don't want him to get any
Yeah, yeah.
press, but he's notoriously bad. So this home's been mistreated for a long time. I've got a lot of renovation to do to make this into an Airbnb, but we decided we're going to go Airbnb because of the look of the house and everything else. In reality, labor is so inexpensive here. I'm going to be able to hire some of this work done. I won't do it all myself. The theming elements, a lot of that I have to do. It's just you can't outsource that
Yeah.
easily. But a lot of the general renovation I'll outsource. I'll probably be about $10,000 to $12,000 in outsourced labor, probably $5,000 in materials, and then furnishing it. I'm guessing to do maybe $8,000 in furnishings. And
Wow.
so I'll be, maybe $50,000 all in on this house. My cash flow on it will be about $2,000 to $2,500 a month after paying for cleaning and paying for utilities, on just my average Airbnb stay in the area and how frequently they
Wow.
book.
And what
So
will it be worth, do you think?
it'll be worth 180 to 200,000.
So you said
Killer
I
that,
don't
deal.
numbers
yeah,
like that anywhere
Killer
in the
deal.
world.
that is a
Yeah,
killer deal, Shane. We may need to talk here
yeah,
offline about that. I'm interested because you're not the only person that's been left at the altar, right? At the 11th hour, you're ready to close, and then the lender says, "Sorry, but I'm gonna need more juice in this deal," right? What would you
yeah.
mind sharing with us? Like what happened? Like what did you? You don't have to necessarily get into
So yeah,
specific numbers,
no,
but we love it actually.
so I'll do this with my other deal. So it was $58,000. I also
Mhm.
do in all my deals that I'm buying. Once I've got them on a contract, I will publish a video on TikTok about
Sure.
them. So these are all open, and you can look at these. This was a month or so ago. I did a walkthrough on this house. It was listed at 99,000. They just lowered the price. It was originally listed for 140,000. They lowered it to 99. I got a contract on it at 58,000. So I got it
Wow.
much rebated down off of that. I probably could have got it a little less than that, I think, but I got it at 58. So $58,000. This is again, about an 1880s house, maybe 1870s. I'm guessing based on the
Wow.
stairway and such. Beautiful home. It's close to downtown Fort Smith in our historic district. It's like one block off the historic district, so I don't have to deal with all the historic bullshit, which
Right.
I don't know if you've ever
Yeah.
had to deal with that or not, but I've
Yeah, no, I
avoided
know. Yeah.
it. This house, $58,000. I will probably have again about a $20,000 estimation for renovation. The whole lower floor has to come out and be put back together. That's about all that really needs to be done on it. It has this incredible pavilion in the back that they did as a carport. But if you watch the walkthrough video, it looks like a park pavilion. It's huge, and it'll be a great place for events. So it'll be downtown, 3-bedroom house with a huge yard and this big pavilion in the back that could seat 20 picnic tables easily. We're going to turn it into an event space that we'll rent as an Airbnb, and we'll be able to probably make $3,500 to $4,000 a month off of this one when we're finished, and we'll be maybe 85,000 all in.
Wow.
You know,
That's a slam dunk. Dave, go
you
ahead.
know what, Shane? You're reminding me. There's a young man I saw him on a Cody Sanchez a YouTube video. He was buying little pieces of land around lakes, and he was building these kind of tiny home type scenarios, and he was really recreating the space. And we also have we met what is now a friend of ours at a mastermind meeting a couple of weeks ago, and he was buying and building glamping sites around the nation, right? And it seems to me you have this very, very unique skill in this area, and I wonder, if capital wasn't an issue. Like, so you're buying these homes, these like 1880s home,
Right.
for $18,000. Like, I just recently put some pavers in one of my homes, and it was like
Right.
$22,000 for the pavers. For the pavers, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like the numbers here are blowing my hair back, and it is, to your point. You're just, it is so beautiful to all my understanding. As a friend of mine just moved to this area in Arkansas, and it's like you don't know how beautiful this place is. right? So and it is growing. It's growing fast. I see a really bright future for you. You know, in your world. And we're going to ask you that question as you sit right here. Do you see like bigger opportunities that you're not doing because of, I'm staying with the funding and finance question. Do you see bigger opportunities that you're whistling past because you're just like, I won't be able to fund that, or I won't be able to do that, because you're a very capable guy.
Right. I could do a lot more deals if funding were not an issue, certainly. I could probably find 10 deals a month in my market. And that's part of why I advertise my market to so many people on TikTok. If I could only find these deals once every 6 months, like some markets, I probably wouldn't be showing these deals
Yeah.
online to people. I wouldn't be encouraging people to come buy in my area. But we could use a lot more investors coming in. The investors that are here, a lot of them are older guys that are in their 80s, which this is true across the country, but I feel like we feel it more strongly here. And those people are no longer able to renovate houses. They no longer want to. They no longer have the energy for it or the desire. A lot of them want to retire, but their kids don't want to take it up. And so these houses are going to get sold to BlackRock. They're going to get sold to
Right.
Amazon. They're going to get
Yeah.
sold to REITs. I don't think this was on purpose, but at one point in time in our history, we looked probably in the 70s, I would guess, as a nation, and we said, okay, people with college degrees make more money than people that don't. So wouldn't it be great for our GDP if everybody had a college degree? And people are like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. You know, if everybody made more money, our GDP as a nation would go up. This would be amazing. So let's make everybody have to stay in high school. Let's make everybody get free college with Pell Grants, and we'll back their loan programs to encourage more and more families to send their kids to school. And I absolutely believe it was well-meaning, but the unintended consequences of that is we took shop out of school. We started shaming kids who were going into home
Blue
improvement
collar. Yeah.
or anything along those lines. So we have a whole, like my year was the first year shop was shut down in my school. I didn't learn how to work with power tools in my school. Fortunately, I learned from my grandfather. Otherwise, I
Yeah.
wouldn't have learned. And my mother would even say, no, you don't need to learn to do that. That's not good. You need to go to school to learn computers, go to school to do this. So we've got a whole generation of people that are 40 and under that don't know how to do shit around the house, frankly.
Yeah.
That's right.
And they don't know how to maintain a house. So they buy a house, the house goes to hell after a few years, and then somebody like me needs to come in and fix it. Or it becomes a financial burden on them because they have to pay the HGTV prices because their education about home improvement is HGTV, which has been lying to you, by the way.
Sure.
Everybody, if you haven't figured that out yet, it
Oh,
doesn't
come
cost
on.
$100,000 every time you're going to renovate a kitchen. Like that is not a real thing in the real world
Yeah.
for those of us doing this. So those incorrect perceptions, I think, lead to a lot of people's fear of stepping into or getting started in real estate. They think we're going to knock a hole in a wall and we're going to see a knob and tube wiring, and now it's
Right.
$100,000. Like, yeah, oh nope, that's because that's what they've seen on TV. That is their exposure to home improvement for
And I
people
think
in that age range.
And I think Shane, that's why your following is so big. You know, I think that people love that authenticity. They love to be able to see like the real peek behind the curtain, because you're right. You don't have to spend $30,000 on a kitchen, and you can kind of get your hands dirty from time to time. I'm curious, you've done something that not many people have done, and you have been able to create a huge following, right? And you get access to all these people. You know, you'll put a video out or you'll do like a live, right? And you'll have all these people like asking you questions, right? They're like, hey, I like what you do. How do I do it? I'm curious as to someone, me, David and I are the same way, right? Like everyone is in the branding business, right? It's like, how do I brand ourselves, whether it's YouTube or podcasts or TikTok or whatever it is, right? It's like, that's like the flavor of the day. When you have all these people coming to you, what's your vision? Like, do you just do it purely because you enjoy it and you love showing cool videos walking through and Airbnb guests getting kicked out? Do you do it because you want to raise capital? Do you want to bring investors in? What is your vision for being able to kind of point the fire hose on all the following that you have? Because I know there's so many people listening to this to be like, this dude has a lot of followers. How did he get to them, and what does he want to do with them after he has that?
Right. So I didn't intend to grow this to that big of a following when I started. I'm not, I wasn't opposed to that happening. I know how to internet market. I know how to make some things happen on the internet. But my intention was entirely to bring more investors into my area. I was at the time about a year and a half ago when I first, basically all my banks dried up. I was DTI, my debt to income ratio was out of line then to continue to get traditional banking loans. And I found out the DSCR investors weren't going to do things under $100,000. So my whole business started having to shift. But I thought, this is a good time. I could talk to other investors from other areas about coming into this area. So I wanted to make people aware of deals for $30,000, $40,000. Like, you just don't see that in so many places.
Yeah.
In a real city with 100,000 people, with real jobs, with real tenants and real opportunity. Not some backwoods cornfield. This is a real place that real people live. So I wanted to bring that to light. That was a big part of my goal. And once I started going, I realized people would send me messages like, I just bought my first investment house after following you. Or I started the carnivore diet after this and I'm down 60 pounds, or I'm down 80 pounds. And I started to realize, like, wow, I'm really helping people make their lives better. And that kept me going. Like, I didn't make any money off of TikTok until maybe 3 or 4 months ago. But I did it for, a year and a half, 2 years, slowly building that audience because there were people that I was making a difference for. I'll tell the story of my second tenant ever. I think this kind of goes back into my mind frame of this. So my second tenant in my second house, this would have been my very first year real estate investing. They were a young couple, and we ran into them. They had a big Great Dane. I love Great Danes. Really good folks. So we start chit-chatting and talking with them, and I invite them over to play Dungeons and Dragons one day. And we hang out with the tenant and we play Dungeons and Dragons. And people say, don't make friends with your tenants, all that. I think that if you're doing really good business, it's okay to make friends with your tenants. I think that it is okay to have that type of relationship. So I hang out with them, play Dungeons and Dragons, and I talk to them about what do they want to do in their future. They're about 26, 28, something like that. And they're like, we're not sure yet, but I was like, if you ever want to look at getting a house or something, come talk to me. I'll help you figure this out. And they rented from me about a year and a half. And one day they reached out and was like, hey, Shayne, I think we want to get a house. Can you help me figure this out? I said, yes. I'm really glad you talked to me instead of going to a realtor, because I bought my first house from a realtor. It was a flipped house. Back then it was $85,000. It was worth about 90. Like I had no equity in it right off the bat. And that's exactly how they would have bought this house if they just went and talked to a realtor, which is why I always tell everybody on my TikTok, don't take advice from anybody about buying a house unless that person owns 10 houses. That includes your realtor, your mother, your grandpa. If they don't own 10 houses, they don't need to be giving you advice about buying houses. So
great advice.
Because if they knew how to buy houses, they would own more than 10. They just, if you know how to do it, you're going to own more than 10. If you don't know how to do it, you might slowly build, but you don't really know what you're doing. So I take them and I introduce them to my banker and I get them pre-approved for my banker at the time, and still occasionally I can get them to do this with people, would do no money down loans on some of these houses like I'm talking about, and would give $20,000 for the renovation expense with it. From the bank's perspective, they bought a house for $45,000. They got $20,000, $65,000 total in on the renovation. The bank has a $65,000 loan on a $200,000 property. Like, the bank loves that compared to a 10% down payment. That's a way more secure situation.
Yeah.
And then they know they can do or they can do a HELOC on that after the fact, or whatever they may need to do to cash that out. So I got them a loan like that. I literally taught them how to sand floors. I crawled under several houses before we picked out the right one. I mean, I went through this whole process with them. And for me, that was incredibly rewarding. And actually, in finishing that and moving them into that house and helping them through that process, it really made me want to, and I don't have the time to do this yet, but at some point I may still look at it, and if anybody out here listening wants to do this and does have the time, I think it would be great for our culture and for our world if, instead of us being landlords who rent from somebody and take that rent, if instead we signed contracts to be housing consultants for a person. So $2,000 a month includes a place to live, but it also includes these guidelines on how to get your credit into shape over the next 2 years, and training maybe once every 2 months on what steps you need to be doing, so that we consult somebody into a better future and we become a part of their team, helping them go on towards success. I think that would be a much healthier way. And I think you'd have a lot less lash back against landlords as a culture if we started to treat people more like people that can be successful. And some people wouldn't do it. That's okay. Sometimes you're just going to be renting a room, but you could be providing so much more as a service. And it's not only rewarding for them, it's personally rewarding, and it's good for your whole community.
Yeah, so many people in our business, they hate the process, they hate the houses, and they hate the tenants. They just do. And I'm like, what are you doing in this business in the first place?
Right.
Like, just go do
Yeah.
something else. Go push, numbers around a computer screen all day. Shayne, we're gonna have to wrap up soon. But this has been a fairly fascinating episode for me, right? But I've got one last question. Given the following that you have, that obviously has its own power. You just mentioned that you're having difficulty maybe raising capital. Well, you can raise capital all day long with the size of the audience that you have, right? We found you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
As we're
Exactly.
lenders, it's what we do for a living. Like, we've moved away from the high volume flipping business, and we are now facilitating people like you to get their first few deals, or to continue to grow. It's what we do. It's
Right.
what we do all day long. And so definitely want to have a conversation with you about
Yeah.
that. But also, you have a lot to educate people on. You have a lot to say, and you have a lot of power in your hands as you go forward, and how you execute that power in terms of mastermind groups, creating a support group for your philosophies, creating a capital environment for your town. $18,000 houses sound great to me. I think you are a podcast or two away from being able to buy every single house in your town and change everything.
Well, I know that there are ways that I could raise capital very quickly from my group and other things. But another part of this is I feel like I have a certain ethical responsibility
That's
to
true.
do things that other people could do as well. And that way, the methods that I use will never be well, Shayne did it because he has 130,000
Yeah.
followers on TikTok. I want it to be something that I can talk to my tenant and say, this is how you start, this is how you do it, these are the steps you take. When you get to this point, follow me on this journey. If it's not something that's repeatable, it's not science. The scientific method, we know it's science when we can repeat the results over and over and over again.
That's
And I
right.
have had some people repeat these results and with success. I've got a guy right now that I got into a house last year for basically no money down here. He's got a duplex. He's almost finished with it. And he's never done a home renovation before. He's an artist and a dance instructor here in town. He's in his 50s, and he's going to have the first wealth build in his life.
Cool.
And I'm going to get to share that success. We'll probably be finishing it up in the next 2 or 3 weeks, and show all the numbers and
That's
everything that he went
amazing.
through in this process. So that to me is more rewarding than me going and saying, everybody on here, let's put $100 into this pot and we'll make a fund or whatever. I don't want to create that necessarily. I know that is something that could be created, but
Yeah.
I think there are better ways to use that. And I think I have more respect for my audience than that.
I think that's a great answer. We're the same way. I've never done a fund or syndication for exactly the same reason. It just wasn't risk that I wanted to take, and it wasn't a path that I wanted to take. I think I've got better options, and I'd like to educate people about how they can make a genuine difference in their lives rather than just take their money and use it to my advantage, to your point. So listen, Clark, any last words or any last question for Shayne as we get out the door?
Yeah, I think it's just been refreshing, Shayne, because a lot of our podcasts, a lot of our guests are very much focused on numbers, wealth creation, which is focused a lot on finances, which tends to be more superficial things. And I think you've shed a lot of light today on being able to help people, being able to help your neighbor, right? Being able to empower people, being able to teach people how to fish, right? And I think that that's something that aligns with a lot of our visions of like, look, we can go down to the homeless shelter and feed, hand out turkeys on Thanksgiving, and that's amazing, right? But what would be even better to figure out that guy that you're handing the turkey leg to is to figure out how we can get them into a better financial position where they can help themselves, right? And so it really strikes home as to what you've said, and I've appreciated the way that this interview and this conversation has gone, because it's different. And I think we knew it was going to be different. We just didn't know where it was going to be different. So we thank you for coming on. It's been great. A lot of people already know who you are, but some people don't. If they want to get a hold of you, if they want to invest in your backyard, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you? Is it on social media? Tell people how they can get a hold of you.
So you can find me on Shayne is great, Shayne. My mother threw a random Y in my name. Shayne is great. You'll see me on TikTok. Just started a YouTube channel a couple of weeks ago, really. So just in case TikTok goes away or something at some point. I'm starting to grow into other medias. I haven't put any time into that yet, just because, again, my time is devoted towards what I'm doing all the time and very well spoken for. But I'm going to try to expand into some more social medias now that we have this larger following, and continue to grow that. But look for me. You'll find me pretty much anywhere you go.
There you go. Shayne is great.
Yeah, Shayne is great. Shayne, the pleasure has all been ours. I will wish you the very, very best. And it won't be the last time we have you on here. We're going to be checking in with you from time to time, Shayne. And of course, if there's anything you need along the way that you think that we could potentially help you with our audience and whatnot, you let us know. So Shayne, for today, thank you so much. We're out of here, and we will see you all soon.
Awesome.
Cheers. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. Look, we truly appreciate your support and hope you found the conversation insightful and engaging and useful. If you enjoy the show, because there's a lot of shows out there, would you please take a moment to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform? Your feedback helps us grow and reach more listeners. So don't miss the show. Please go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. We hope you enjoyed today's show. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to the Burn Your Boats podcast with Clark Lunt and David Shaw. We would love to hear from you. Please reach out at burnyourboatswealth.com with comments, questions, and if you have a topic you would like Clark and David to discuss on an upcoming episode. We would very much appreciate it if you took the time to rate and review Burn Your Boats podcast on your favorite podcast listening app, and make sure to follow and share on social media. Content in Burn Your Boats podcast is for entertainment purposes only and is not legal or financial advice. Please review our legal disclaimer at burnyourboatswealth.com. Thank you for listening.